I guess I'll start from the beginning. I was raised not in any direction as far as religion or God goes, but at the age of 6, God put it in my heart, and I spoke these words. I said, I want to go to church. My parents at the time were a little bit shocked that I wanted to go to church. What 6-year-old wants to randomly go to church? So they ended up bringing us to church. I got really involved in the ministry. I started loving to worship God with the youth groups. It came a time whenever I was about 10 years old that they encouraged me to actually read the Bible for myself. So I opened it up without any real direction in my life. No mentors, no pastoral staff, oversight, no influence, nobody to answer those hard questions that I had, that ministries like these actually, they like to help you with. Opened the book, read it to about book 3, Leviticus, shut it immediately, said this is not the God that I was raised thinking existed, this God of love, this God that loves me. All I saw was a murderous psychopath. So I rejected God entirely. I turned against him on the basis of my preconceived ideas as far as what this preaching was all about, who this God was, not even asking these questions, just making my own conclusions based off of the information that I had read without any real understanding. But whenever I rejected God, within about 2 weeks, I was already slicing my arms open every single night before I went to bed, just in order to feel something. I immediately was given over to a depraved mind. I wanted nothing but sin. My carnal appetite grew tremendously. All I desired was to abuse drugs and alcohol. This isn't what most people experience in the church whenever they reject God, but this is exactly what I experienced. And I've read a few testimonies from the Bible. They've also shared in those same exact experiences. My mind became a breeding ground for demonic activities. You mix in, the pharmaceutical industry trying to fix these issues that were really demonic influences, and you have a pharmaceutical cocktail. You got antidepressants, antipsychotics, ADHD medication, which is really methamphetamine, all of these different drugs being given to me as a child, trying to curb suicidal, homicidal ideations, anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of these disorders, so to speak, with my brain. I threw away all pharmaceuticals by the age of 14 and decided to start smoking a lot of weed. I thought that my problems were fixed because I was high all the time. By the age of 17 years old, I had dedicated my entire life to being a career criminal. Dealing drugs was the only way that I could feed my own addictions. And I was addicted to heroin, I was addicted to crack, I was addicted to meth. By 20 years old, I had already had about 5 run-ins with the police in 3 different states for distribution. 3 of them I talked myself out of, paid for another case, dropped thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on this just to be able to stay out of trouble. But whenever it came time and I violated my distribution probation with another distribution case, they locked me up and they said, you know what, Micah, you can't just pay to get out of these situations. And so I was in jail for 362 days before I actually saw a judge for the cause of me being in jail. I used to be upset about that whenever I was going to jail, but that's not how I felt after I was saved. Before I went to jail, a couple miracles started happening. Um, this isn't a miracle, but my best friend got murdered. And in response to that, I decided to do what I always do, and that's get high. I tried smoking a lot of weed. I tried snorting a lot of cocaine. I tried drinking vodka. I tried taking ecstasy, all of these drugs, and I just couldn't get high. And it made me so angry inside. I was throwing things, having tantrums as a grown adult. I was a very aggressive individual to be around, and nobody really wanted to be around me whenever I was hostile like that. They were fine while I was sedating myself, but as soon as you take that away, I'm not a very friendly individual. After all of this, I had a very clear dream. I was running through the city being chased by gangsters and police officers. I guess deepest fears of mine were surfacing. I was running and ducking and dodging behind cars. They were shooting at me, and I was running out of breath because all I was doing at that time was smoking about 4 packs of cigarettes a day to try and cope with not being able to consume large amounts of drugs. I saw before me as I was running a park bench with my deceased family members, and I saw my grandfather, old hippie, shirtless, went and sat right next to him, and his body was glowing. He had translucent skin. His heart was beating out of his chest. And I went and I looked over and I touched his heart, and this flash of blinding light woke me up. Realest thing I ever seen in my life. And my concept of spirituality at that time in my life was that there's a chemical in your brain called dimethyltryptamine, and whenever you sleep and you dream, this gets released, and whenever you die, it gets released in these large quantities. And so that's why people that have faith have an eternity with whatever their faith was alluding to here in this life. And because of my grandfather's faith in Jesus and God, that's where he was spending eternity. So I turned and I prayed after this dream to the God of my grandfather, and I said, God, if you're real, open up a free cigarette rehab that I can go to free of charge, because I gotta quit smoking these cigarettes. See, my deluded brain at that time had said that the problem in the dream wasn't that I was dealing drugs. It wasn't that I was a criminal. It was that I was smoking cigarettes and couldn't outrun police officers and gangsters if it came down to that. I didn't really see anything wrong with what I was doing. I thought I was making a sacrifice for people that I liked, my friends. Didn't end up actually being that way. But you know, I was driving through the city with my girlfriend, and I turned to her in response to this dream, and I asked her, I said, do you believe in Armageddon? And it was just a weird question that just came to my mind late at night. And she said, why are you asking me that? I said, well, your parents are Catholic. I didn't know if you had any Catholic ideologies like that. And she said, yeah, I mean, I guess I believe in Armageddon. Why are you asking, though? And I said, I don't know. I feel like God's trying to tell me something. And immediately this light turned on in my cab of my truck right above my head. I pulled the truck over, and I took the keys out. I turned everything off. I closed every door and I locked it, and that light was still on. We couldn't figure out for the life of us how this light had turned on, and it turned on right above my head. We were having anxiety attacks. We were freaking out. We didn't know what to make of this miraculous occurrence. And a few things other than that happened before I went into jail, but you know, I'm not going to go into super details about those things. The most important thing about before jail was I was a dangerous criminal. I hated Christians. I hated Jews. I had preconceived ideas about both of them. You know, and I was living in sin. I was steeped in sin. And every spirituality, every spiritual path that I had ever encountered left me okay in my sins. They made me feel peace living in sin. And so that's how we can really tell the difference between the spirit of the New Age and those spirits that you can encounter through hallucinogenic compounds and different spiritual practices like chanting mantras and astral projection and all of these different things, is that if that spirit is leaving you okay with sin, it's not the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit would never leave you okay with your sin. It would convict you of your sin and lead you into righteousness. We have a moral aptitude in our hearts. So I know that those spiritual things are real, but they're not of God. This is a spiritual world we're living in. This world is a lot more than meets the eye. So I got admitted to jail 362 days. I guess that's what God can call a free cigarette rehab. He answered that prayer. First prayer I ever really prayed to him. But whenever I went in, my life was a mess. I was hostile. I was angry. All I wanted was drugs, and they weren't working for me anymore. I hated Christians. I hated Jews. I persecuted them both. I knew their book to the extent of my own knowledge, and I was able to use it against them to make them feel bad, to make them doubt what they believe in. And so with all this aggression in my heart, you're in a jail cell for 16, 17 hours a day. I'm gonna go to church. I'm gonna leave my jail cell, go to church, get some of that aggression off. And so I persecuted Christians while I was in jail for what they believe in. I persecuted their God, I persecuted their Bible, and what I saw in response was answered questions. What I saw in response was faith. What I saw in response was peaceful responses, gentleness and kindness in delivering the reason to the hope that they had inside of them. I never really experienced that in the world. Anybody that I ever got into an argument with either backed down because they were a little scared of my aggressive temper, or they matched my aggressive temper in a hostile argument. So I'm going through my first few months of jail, and I'm persecuting them. I'm saying, well, why does it say in Psalms that this guy wishes babies' heads were dashed across rocks? Why did God kill every single person with a flood except for 8 people? Why would God have a response of somebody eating a forbidden fruit be the damnation of every man, woman, and child born in that bloodline? I said, what is up with this extreme behavior? I said, I don't understand. And I persecuted them for these things. Eventually, one of these pastors, he out of nowhere, he's like, Micah, have you ever tried to do anything that's in the Bible? I said, tried? What, the 10 Commandments? I could keep those easily. He said, no, not the 10 Commandments. Have you ever tried to do anything? Like, have you ever fasted before? I said, for health reasons, that's about it. He said, well, why don't you go back to your jail cell and declare a fast to God? Tell me how it goes. I said, okay, all right, you're on. I thought in my mind that what he was referring to is that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the Father. And so I figured, according to that verse, I should be able to fast for 7 days, no food, no water, and not be hungry or thirsty. So that's exactly what I did. I said, God, I'm going to fast for 7 days, no food, no water. If you're real, obviously, I'm not going to go hungry or thirsty. And I said, I want prayers that can move mountains. So I went and I told the pastor about this, and I said, I declared my fast. I want prayers that can move mountains. He said, Micah, it's faith that can move mountains. I was like, oh, man, I can't get anything right. But on day 3, I'm feeling pretty spiritual, having not eaten or drinking in 3 days. And I'm praying to a God that I'm not even conscious of. I don't know who he is. I just know he's out there, possibly. And if he can hear me, I want him to know that I'm praying for good things. I want all famine to be ended. I want all war to be ended, all sickness to be ended. I want everybody to be prosperous and all these things, okay? So I have this idea of what I think God's will should be on earth as it is in heaven, and I'm praying for it to be done right now according to my will. The next day, as I woke up, I went and got my breakfast tray. I was making a huge scene in the jail of my fast. I was like, oh yeah, you can have my food. Sure, you can have my lunch, you can have my dinner, making a huge scene out of it. And on my way to go pick up my breakfast tray, we passed by a bookshelf every single morning. Every single book was in orderly fashion except for one book, and it was staring me in the face, and it said Prayers That Can Move Mountains. This book was 7 chapters long, and the 7th chapter was all about prayer and fasting. I went in and I read it, and I started to understand that I'm not praying for God's will to be done on earth. I'm praying for my will to be done, and I'm starting to conceive that maybe I don't really know what God's will is, and maybe I can't pray in faith because I don't really know who God is. A month goes by, and I'm sitting in church again. Another miracle happens. This prophet stands up. I don't know him as a prophet, but he prophesies. He looks directly at me, and he says, "Son, what is your name?" I said, "Micah." He said, "Good. I have a message to you from the Lord." I said, "What? Huh? Who are you, dude?" He said, "In 7 days, your financial problems with your lawyer are going to be solved." I said, "How do you know I have a lawyer? How do you know I have financial problems with this lawyer? How do you know I don't have a public defender? What are you talking about? How do you even know who I am? This is like the first time I've ever seen you in my life." Right? Sure enough, 7 days later, before I get to that, my parents, for about 4 months, gave me the same response every single time I asked them if I could have them sell my car, sell my truck, my motorcycle, my personal belongings, if they could meet with drug dealers that owed me a lot of money. And they said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to meet with drug dealers. We're not going to do anything for you in order for you to have this $2,000 that you owe your lawyer. You got yourself into this mess, you can get yourself out." So for me to expect that my parents were going to come in 7 days later having fully paid my lawyer was the furthest thing from my mind. On the 7th day, we actually had a visit at 7 o'clock. And during that visit, they opened up and they said, "Micah, we paid your lawyer in full. We woke up this morning, we felt like it's something that we needed to do." And I said, "You don't even understand what you just did. I'm blown away by this." I said, 7 days ago, this prophet came to me and he said this exact day, this exact thing would happen. He said in 7 days, your financial problems with your lawyer would be solved. And here you guys are today telling me that you guys paid my lawyer in full. They said, "Whatever, Micah, just make sure we get our money." I said, "Okay." Realizing that I had showed my parents nothing but psychosis my whole entire life. A month goes by and I'm fasting again for 3 days, and I'm praying. I'm saying, "God, I want my parents to be blessed like they've blessed me." 7 days after the first day of my fast, my parents received $6,000. 7 days from the third day of my fast, my parents received $900. Altogether, I had $6,900. I told my parents they could keep everything, just pay my lawyer. They said, "No, we don't want to keep everything. We want to just make sure that your medical bills are paid off from all those times that you were in a psych ward, banging your head against the wall in a straitjacket." I said, "Okay, all right, fair enough." They said, "Okay, well, after all said and done, you still owe us $700. Blown away by this, I go back to my jail cell and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm talking to the God that I don't even really know. And I said, I had a 7-day fast confirmed by a 7-chapter book with a 7-day prophecy, followed by a 7-day blessing and another 7-day blessing, and you're going to tell me that I owe my parents $700? I said, "Wow, God, that's pretty lucky." God opened up the heavens and spoke. He said, "Micah, it is not luck that got you here. You are not lucky to be alive. You are blessed to be alive. In my hand, your whole life has been life and death, and you have chosen death every single time. But I have chosen life for you." And I hit my knees to the ground, and I begged for salvation. I begged for and I didn't stop begging for salvation. I knew that I was a sinner. I had all kinds of sinful memories flashing through my mind like a reel. But there was no salvation attached. All I felt was condemnation. All I knew was the penalty of my sins being death, an eternal eternal hell. At that moment, I felt like I was already in hell, knowing where my eternal destination would be. I knew exactly what God I was talking to. It wasn't the God of this religion or this philosophy. It was the God, the Lord Almighty, the God of justice, the God of mercy, the God of love, but also the God of wrath, the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent Lord. He's benevolent. He is good. I knew exactly who I was talking about, and I knew exactly where I stood before him. I paled in comparison. All my righteous works were filthy rags before his eyes. I knew this just by hearing his voice. Jesus says that my sheep hear my voice. They recognize who's speaking. They know that I'm not Satan. They know that I'm not this other God. They know exactly who's speaking to them whenever I speak. But I didn't actualize salvation in my life. I went through that entire month feeling condemned. The entire month of March, I got this massive fever. It was burning at 106 degrees, and I'm asking the nursing staff for some help. They're like, "No, Micah, you got yourself into this mess. You can get yourself out." People were being hauled away dead out of these jail cells like it was nothing. No medication to help overdosing addicts. No medication. Some people being denied heart pressure medication. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So no, they're not going to reduce my fever from 106. And I'm curled up in a ball. My mind is burning. I'm starting to freak out. I'm thinking I'm going to die here in a jail cell, dying my sins. And I'm just praying the entire time, "Lord, have mercy. Do not let me die a sinner." No salvation. I was telling the pastor about this. I said, "Look, I know God is real. He spoke to me. I know that I'm a sinner." I said, I've been begging for salvation this entire month and it hasn't come to me." And he looks me dead in my eyes and he says, "Micah, Jesus died for you." And I swear this Holy Spirit hit me like a brick. This train wreck of grace overflowed me. Faith and love and peace all overwhelmed my soul. At that moment, I realized that I had an empty void in my heart. It was infinite. Everything from the world, I tried satisfying it. I tried filling it. It wouldn't go past anything. It wouldn't even scratch the surface of that infinite void. There's nothing in this world that could satisfy that void in my heart. Only the infinite God and his infinite love that's never ending and never failing could satisfy that void. Immediately following the Holy Spirit's invasion in my heart, I could not resist but to tell the other prisoners, the other jail cells, go over to and talk with them, go out to the yard and speak to them about what had just happened in my life. There was no stopping. There was no thinking about it. There was only going, being sent to go speak about this miracle that just took place. I was overwhelmed with zeal. Nothing in my life had ever happened like this thing. I mean, there was tons of things that I used to glorify in my sins, but I had never received salvation from God. That there was nothing that in jail that could stop me. I was speaking to these people about things that I didn't even know about. I had no preparation. I didn't go to college for this. I wasn't educated on this. I wasn't raised in this. All I knew was what had happened. And that same thing that happened to me started happening to those people that I shared this good news with. It was overwhelming, and it's still overwhelming because it's still happening today. I'd say about 5 months goes by, and I'm getting released from that jail, and I'm going to a new jail, and this is where I'm actually going to await trial for the crime that I'm actually in jail for in the first place. The seventh seven comes in at this point in the story. I'm reading the Bible, and there's a kid that comes in to my cell, and he's just getting beat up all the time. I mean, he was a product of interfamily relations. You know, he had been smoking meth since he was 8 years old. He was deformed and beat up. I mean, bad. He was getting bullied throughout by every prisoner. And I said, man, you're going to be safe if you come in here. You're good. And so I just kept reading the Bible. And he's like, what are you doing over there, man? I said, I'm reading the Bible. He said, man, I really wish that I could do that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I can't read. I can't read. And so I read the Bible to him, cover to cover. 7th time I read the Bible while I was in jail. And following that, I went before a judge and I said, I'm guilty for crimes that are worse than this. I deserve the full penalty of the law. And I got released that day. Released. They said, no, you're not going to prison. You're being released today. Again, overwhelmed. I said, I was confused. I was expecting prison and I get released. And so I come out to this world. I'm breathing fresh air for the first time. And surely enough, after all the preparation, all the sanctification before in jail, all the removal of worry, I'm out in the world. And all of a sudden, I'm worried about what I'm gonna eat, where I'm gonna sleep, what I'm gonna do for work. I'm putting in applications everywhere. I'm a convicted felon. I have no job history, no job experience, no education, nowhere to go with this lack of skills. And I'm applying everywhere. I can't even get a job at McDonald's. That's how bad it was. My mom, I'm staying with her and she's like, look, you gotta get a job. I'm like, I'm trying. I'm really trying. And so she had an off day and she's like, look, we're gonna go on my off day and we're gonna find you a job. We're gonna look all over this city and we're going to leave. And immediately my mentor calls me and he's like, Micah, are you looking for a job right now? I said, yeah. He's like, okay, I got one for you. And so he calls me back. He says, all right, your new employer knows everything about you now. I just told him everything. I said, everything? What? He said, yeah, everything. So you're hired, you're good. See, if I would have just not worried, God would have taken care of me. But I got back into that flesh as soon as I escaped the situation that I had grown accustomed to, that I was comfortable in. This can't be. We got to be prepared for getting out of our comfort zone as Christians, as followers of Christ. I was comfortable in jail. That's shocking. But now I'm out in the real world, getting used to what's going on out here. I can't talk to people out here like I talk to them in there. So as a new Christian, with the amount of zeal that I have, it's important to remember, if you get born again, you're radically saved. Submit yourself to the elders. Learn from them. Be discipled in order that you can disciple others. You can have people saved all day long, but you can also be extremely reckless and push people away with your zeal as well. There has not been a shortage of miracles since I was saved. I've seen pedophiles, murderers, rapists radically saved and transformed in a day. There's no drug that can do that to these people. There is no teaching or way of life that can change an individual inside and out. Only God can make that transformation in somebody's life according to His plan and purpose in an instant like that. Whenever you are saved, it's by grace through faith, not of works, lest we could boast. It is a gift from God. And whenever you receive that gift, you can't say that I was the one that did this. I was the one that turned my life around. I changed my life. I decided to get off drugs. No, it was a gift. It had nothing to do with my own abilities or my own will. I did not will to change. My will The extent of my desire was to hate Christians, hate Jews, and continue to be addicted to drugs. That was my will. God came in. My actions, my efforts were to continue doing wrong. God came in. He caused a transformation in my mind. The Bible says, in view of God's mercy, offer yourself a living sacrifice. This is your true and proper worship. It says, be transformed by the renewing of mind. You do not transform your own mind. God transforms your mind when you offer yourself a sacrifice. Jesus was real. He said, pick up your cross and follow me. He said, it's not going to be easy. He says, the only thing that's promised is persecution. You will be persecuted for following me. But you cannot deny the truth. You can only hide from it. You can hide from it your whole entire life, but He is real and He loves you. A lot of people share a similar story, and whenever they get released from jail, they go back to the vomit that they formerly had. They've come to the knowledge of how awful that life was for them, but they return back to it. Like an animal returns to his vomit. I knew that there was that potential. In 362 days, I saw people leaving Christian, coming back an addict, leaving Christian, coming back an addict. They're playing. I don't want to play. I don't want people to play Christian. I don't want people to call themselves Christian and having not received Christ's Spirit and their mind renewed to His mind. I hope that this video has reached some people wherever you're at, whatever you believe. Keep searching. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all of this will be added to you.